You want to know what 23 years of client relationships looks like when it walks out the door. It looks like a silver-spooned VP with an MBA from daddy's alma mater, standing in a boardroom full of people who used to respect you, announcing that your services are no longer required. Preston Whitmore III stood at the head of the mahogany table like he was posing for a business magazine cover. Shoot that nobody had requested. His suit was Brioni, probably $8,000 of Italian tailoring that fit him like it was painted on by someone who charged by the brushstroke. His cufflinks were monogrammed with initials that went back 4 generations. His tie clip was gold, not gold-plated, actual gold, because apparently subtlety wasn't taught at whatever finishing school his family shipped him to. His hair was slicked back with something expensive that made it look perpetually wet, like he'd just emerged from a pool filled with other people's money. And his smile, that particular smile that only comes from 3 generations of never being told no and never having to earn anything, spread across his face like an oil slick covering a pristine beach. "We're restructuring the wealth management division," he announced, not looking at me directly. Speaking to the room like I wasn't sitting 6 feet away in a chair I'd occupied for over 2 decades, Margaret's client acquisition methodology is, how do I put this delicately, legacy-focused. He let that word hang in the air like he'd said something clever. Legacy. As if experience was a disease. Our high-net-worth clients deserve a more dynamic approach, something with vision, something modern, something that scales. He finally turned to face me. His eyes were the color of old money and twice as cold, empty of anything resembling actual understanding. "We appreciate your years of service." "Margaret." He said it like he was thanking a waitress for adequate coffee. "Human resources will handle the transition details. I'm sure you'll find opportunities elsewhere." Scattered nodding from the younger executives who'd learned that agreeing with Preston was cheaper than disagreeing with him and significantly better for their career trajectories. I sat there in my navy blazer, the same one I'd worn to my first major client meeting 23 years ago when I was nervous and hungry and determined to build something that mattered. The fabric was worn at the elbows now. The buttons had been replaced twice. But it still fit, which is more than I could say for Preston's understanding of the wealth management business. I just looked at him. This kid who probably couldn't tell the difference between a trust fund and a trust fall. And I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't mention that every single client he was talking about, those high net worth individuals who deserved something more dynamic, had been personally cultivated by me over 23 years of birthday cards and funeral attendances and graduation celebrations and 3 a.m. phone calls during market crashes when they were terrified and needed someone steady to talk them off the ledge. After 2 decades managing money for people who trusted me with their children's futures, their retirement security, their family legacies, you learn that some battles aren't won with words. They're won with patience, with timing, with understanding leverage that other people don't even know exists. What Preston Whitmore III didn't know, what nobody in that mahogany-paneled conference room knew, was that 94% of my clients had signed personal service agreements, not with Harrington Sterling Partners, with me, Margaret Sullivan. Portable contracts that I'd quietly negotiated into every relationship over the past 15 years, one by one, birthday card by birthday card, hospital visit by hospital visit, contracts that meant when I walked out that door, my clients had the legal right to walk with me, and not a single person in that room had ever thought to check. 237 clients, $840 million in assets under management, all of it tied to one name, mine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started. My name is Margaret Sullivan. My official title is Senior Vice President of Private Wealth Management at Harrington Sterling Partners, one of the oldest and most respected investment firms in the city. The title sounds prestigious, and honestly, it is. It opens doors. It gets restaurant reservations. It impresses people at cocktail parties who don't really understand what wealth management actually involves. What the title doesn't tell you is that I'm also the firm's unofficial therapist, estate planning confidant, marriage counselor, family mediator, and occasionally the person who talks clients off emotional ledges when markets drop 40% in a week and they're convinced everything they've built is disappearing. I manage money. But really, I manage fear. I manage grief. I manage the complicated, messy, deeply human emotions that come with wealth. Wealth that people didn't earn themselves and feel guilty about. Wealth they're terrified of losing because it's the only thing connecting them to parents who are gone. Wealth that's tearing their families apart because siblings who used to love each other are now fighting over percentages and distributions, and who deserves what? For 23 years, I've been the calm voice on the phone at 2 a.m. when a client's portfolio drops 6 figures before breakfast and they're panicking so hard they can barely breathe. I've been the steady presence at hospital bedsides when patriarchs are dying and families are already fighting over inheritances that haven't been distributed yet. I've been the trusted advisor who knows more about my clients' marriages than their spouses do, more about their children than their children know about themselves, more about their fears than they've ever admitted to anyone, including themselves. The Harrington Sterling offices occupy the top 4 floors of a limestone building in the financial district. The building was constructed in 1923, back when architecture was meant to intimidate, and it still does. The lobby has marble floors and brass fixtures and a ceiling so high that conversations echo. The elevators are wood-paneled with mirrors that show you exactly how nervous you look before a big meeting. The offices themselves smell like old leather, fresh money, and the particular anxiety of people who have more than they could spend in 3 lifetimes but still somehow feel like it's not enough. Never enough. That's the secret of wealth. It doesn't cure insecurity. It amplifies it. The carpets on the executive floor are thick enough to swallow footsteps. The art on the walls costs more than most people's houses. Paintings selected not because anyone loves them, but because they signal a certain level of seriousness. The conference rooms have names like the Wellington Room and the Pemberton Suite and the Founders Hall, as if we're running a country club instead of an investment firm. I've spent more hours in this building than in my own home. My assistant, Jennifer, knows my coffee order better than my ex-husband ever did. She knows which files I need before I ask for them, which calls to put through and which to send to voicemail, which clients require immediate attention and which ones just want to chat because they're lonely. The security guards know which elevator I prefer. The cleaning crew knows to leave fresh flowers on my desk every Monday because I once mentioned, offhandedly, that it made the week feel more manageable. 17 years later, those flowers still appear. That's what loyalty looks like. Not because I asked for it, because I noticed people. While the rest of the firm chases the latest algorithmic trading platform, or argues about cryptocurrency allocations, or debates whether artificial intelligence will make human advisors obsolete, I'm in client living rooms explaining why their grandfather's railroad stock isn't the investment it used to be. I'm at kitchen tables helping widows understand what their late husband's portfolio actually contains, which is often the first time they've ever looked at their own finances because he handled everything, and now he's gone. I'm in hospital waiting rooms, making sure that when the worst happens, the financial transition is the one thing the family doesn't have to worry about. I'm the reason Harrington Sterling has a 96% client retention rate in an industry where 50% is considered excellent. I'm the reason our referral rate is triple the industry average. I'm the reason the Pemberton family, the Whitfield Trust, the Chen Foundation, the DeLuca Estate, and 47 other multi-generational wealth holders have stayed with this firm through 3 market crashes, 2 recessions, 1 global pandemic, and countless moments of fear and uncertainty. Here's the thing about wealth management that people like Preston Whitmore will never understand. The money is the easy part. Numbers follow rules. Markets can be analyzed. Risk can be quantified and hedged and explained in charts that make sense to anyone willing to look at them. But people are complicated. People panic at the worst possible moments. People make emotional decisions when they should be logical, and logical decisions when they should listen to their gut. People need someone they trust more than they trust their own judgment, more than they trust the numbers on a screen, more than they trust the advice of family members who have their own agendas. And trust takes decades to build. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be manufactured. It cannot be optimized or disrupted or growth hacked. You can't algorithm your way into a client's confidence. You can't disrupt your way into being the person someone calls when their mother dies and they don't know how to handle the estate. You can't optimize the relationship that makes a 90-year-old widow feel safe enough to let you manage the money her husband spent 60 years accumulating. I am that person for 237 families. I know their secrets. I know their fears. I know their shames and their hopes and their complicated family dynamics. I know which son has the gambling problem that nobody talks about. I know which daughter hasn't spoken to her parents in 12 years because of something that happened at Thanksgiving in 2011. I know which marriage is held together by nothing but shared assets and mutual exhaustion, and the unspoken agreement that divorce would be too expensive. And I know that every single one of those 237 families signed a personal service agreement that says if I leave Harrington Sterling Partners for any reason, they have the legal right to transfer their accounts and follow me wherever I go. Portable contracts. 15 years of quiet negotiation, one clause at a time, one relationship at a time, one moment of trust at a time. Preston Whitmore didn't know about those agreements. He didn't know because he never asked. He never read the client files beyond the asset totals and fee structures. He never bothered to understand the relationships that those numbers represented, the human beings behind the account balances, the decades of carefully built trust that made those numbers possible. He just saw an expensive senior VP taking up space that could go to someone younger, cheaper, and more impressed by his family name. He just saw a line item to be optimized. If you're sensing that this story is about to take a very expensive turn for Mr. Preston Whitmore III, you're absolutely correct. Before I walk you through the complete financial demolition of a man who thought legacy meant a trust fund instead of earned respect, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, give this a like. I'm about to describe what happens when generational wealth collides with generational wisdom. And honestly, it's not even close to a fair fight. Something like 93% of you listen without subscribing. That's worse than my client retention rate, and I take that personally. We're in the relationship business here. Show some loyalty. The carnage is just getting started. Now, back to Preston and his $8,000 suit. Preston Whitmore III wasn't promoted to VP of Wealth Management. He was placed there, like a decorative vase in a museum exhibit about inherited mediocrity. Like a painting that nobody asked for, but nobody had the authority to remove. His grandfather, Preston Whitmore Y, had founded Harrington Sterling Partners in 1962 with $100,000 and a Rolodex full of wealthy contacts from his Harvard days. He built something real, something that mattered. By the time he died in 1994, the firm managed $2 billion and had a reputation for discretion, integrity, and results. His father, Preston Whitmore II, ran the firm into moderate success in the 80s and 90s, riding the bull markets and taking credit for growth that was mostly driven by factors beyond anyone's control. He was competent. Not brilliant, but competent. He knew enough to hire good people and stay out of their way. The current Preston's uncle, Harrison Whitmore, sat on the board with enough shares to make any suggestion sound like a mandate. He was the smart one in that generation, the one who understood that the family name was an asset to be protected, not a weapon to be wielded. And then there was Preston III, the grandson, the heir, the one who had spent 4 years at a hedge fund that his family had invested in, doing work that nobody could quite describe but everyone agreed was very important. Strategic analysis, market positioning, stakeholder engagement, words that meant nothing and produced less. Then he spent 2 years getting an MBA from Wharton, his grandfather's alma mater, writing the family name into an acceptance letter that his grades alone would never have earned. His thesis was on disruptive innovation in private banking. I read it. Someone forwarded it to me as a joke after his appointment was announced. The word synergy appeared 47 times. The word relationship appeared 3 times, all in the context of stakeholder relationships, whatever that means. The word trust appeared 0 times. I wasn't laughing. I was taking notes. He arrived at Harrington Sterling on a Monday in January, the week after New Year's, when everyone was still sluggish from holiday excess and too tired from family obligations to put up proper resistance. His title was Executive Vice President of Strategic Client Development, which, as far as I could tell, meant he got to have opinions about clients he'd never met and strategies he'd never implemented. His first week, he called a division-wide meeting to introduce what he called his vision for modernizing our approach. The meeting was mandatory. The conference room was packed. The presentation deck had animated transitions and stock photos of diverse young people looking at tablets with expressions of wonder, as if they'd never seen numbers before. He talked about digital-first engagement and algorithmic relationship mapping and client lifecycle optimization. He used the phrase, unlock shareholder value 4 times. He used the phrase, synergistic opportunities 3 times. He used the phrase, leverage our core competencies twice. He never once mentioned the word trust. He never once mentioned the word relationship in any context that suggested actual human connection. He never once acknowledged that our clients were actual human beings with fears and hopes and histories and families and complicated emotional landscapes that couldn't be captured in a CRM database or optimized by an algorithm. I sat in the back of that meeting and watched my colleagues' faces, the younger advisors, the ones who'd been with the firm less than 5 years, looked intrigued. They saw opportunity. They saw someone speaking their language, the language of disruption and innovation and moving fast and breaking things. They didn't understand yet that in wealth management, breaking things means breaking trust. And trust is the only thing we actually sell. The senior advisors looked worried. They saw what I saw, a storm coming. A generation that didn't understand what made the business work. A family heir who thought the family name was enough. I just looked tired. I was tired. But I was also paying attention. I met Preston properly in the elevator 2 weeks later. He recognized me from the org chart, apparently Margaret Sullivan. He smiled that oil-slick smile, extending a hand with a handshake that was firm in the way that people who read business books about handshakes think firm should feel. Too much pressure, too long held. You manage the legacy portfolio. He actually called it that, the legacy portfolio. Like I was a museum curator. Impressive retention numbers. Really impressive. I told him retention wasn't the goal. Relationships were. Retention was just what happened when you did relationships right. He tilted his head like I'd said something quaint. Like I'd mentioned that I still used a rotary telephone or wrote letters by hand. Sure. He nodded in that way people nod when they're not actually listening. But at scale, we need metrics we can actually measure. Relationships don't show up on quarterly reports. Hard to put a number on trust. He actually chuckled. Like it was funny. Like trust being unmeasurable was a design flaw in the concept rather than the entire point. I smiled and said nothing. We both knew the conversation was over. The first month was reconnaissance. Preston spent his time requesting client files, analyzing portfolio compositions, asking questions about fee structures and service allocations. He wanted to know how much time each advisor spent per client. He wanted to know the revenue per hour of relationship management. He wanted to calculate the ROI of birthday cards and hospital visits and 3 a.m. phone calls. He was looking for inefficiencies, places where the firm was spending money that couldn't be directly tied to immediate revenue. Places where the human element exceeded what his spreadsheet said was optimal. I knew what that meant. I've been in this industry long enough to recognize when someone is building a case for cuts. When someone is looking for ways to reduce headcount and call it optimization, by month 2, the changes started. Client appreciation events were canceled as non-essential expenditure. We'd been hosting these events for 27 years. Summer garden parties, holiday dinners, spring luncheons at the country club, events where clients met each other, built relationships, felt like they were part of something bigger than just a portfolio number, gone. The annual holiday gift program, personalized presents for each client based on their interests and hobbies that I'd maintained for 19 years, was eliminated as not scalable. Mrs. Pemberton had received a first edition book every year, something related to her passion for Victorian literature. Mr. Chen had received rare tea from his family's province in China. The Whitfield children had received personalized ornaments that chronicled their milestones, first graduations, weddings, babies, not scalable, gone. The dedicated phone line that clients could call 24 hours a day was rerouted to a general service center, a service center staffed by people who had never met our clients, who didn't know their histories, who couldn't tell the difference between a routine inquiry and a genuine crisis. I raised objections in every meeting. I documented every concern in emails with careful subject lines: client experience impact assessment, relationship continuity, risk analysis, long-term retention implications. I was professional. I was thorough. I was completely and utterly ignored. Preston called my approach high touch but low efficiency in a leadership meeting. He said it in front of the entire executive team. 14 people who had known me for years, who knew what my relationships meant to the firm's bottom line. Margaret's clients love her. He said it like it was a consolation prize. But love doesn't scale. We need systems, not superstars. We need processes that work regardless of who's implementing them. We need to reduce our dependency on individual relationships. I sat there and let the words wash over me, cold and calculated, like everything about him. I let him think I was beaten. I let him think I was just another legacy employee too set in her ways to adapt, another dinosaur waiting for the meteor. What I was actually doing was reviewing every client contract I'd ever signed, making sure the personal service agreements were current and properly filed, making sure the portability clauses were ironclad and legally binding, making sure that when the moment came, and I knew it was coming, I would be ready. The moment came faster than I expected. Preston had been pushing for what he called portfolio rebalancing, which meant reassigning clients from senior advisors to junior ones who cost less in salary and benefits and didn't ask uncomfortable questions about why we were dismantling everything that worked. My clients, the ones I'd spent 23 years cultivating, the relationships that represented over $800 million in assets, were on his list. He wanted to move them to a team of 20-somethings with algorithms and enthusiasm and absolutely no understanding of what it meant to manage money for someone who remembered the Great Depression firsthand. No understanding of generational trauma around money. No understanding of the complicated family dynamics that made every financial decision fraught with emotional weight. I requested a meeting. I explained, calmly and professionally, that it wouldn't work. I told him my clients wouldn't accept reassignment. I told him the relationships were personal, built over decades, not transferable. I told him that attempting to reassign these accounts would trigger departures, not retention. He listened with that tilted head look of condescending patience. Then he told me that was exactly the problem. The firm can't be dependent on any single person. Margaret. He actually patted the table like he was explaining something to a child. That's not sustainable. That's not good business. If clients are only loyal to you and not to Harrington Sterling, then we've failed to build proper institutional relationships. I asked him if he understood what institutional relationships meant in wealth management. He said something about brand equity and value proposition. I stopped listening. 3 days later, I got the meeting invite. No subject line, no agenda. Conference Room 12, Preston Whitmore III, Christine Walsh, HR Director, Thomas Chen, Legal Counsel. The meeting was at 4 p.m. on a Thursday, late enough in the day that I'd have to leave immediately afterward, early enough that word would spread through the office grapevine by Friday morning. Perfectly calculated to maximize humiliation while minimizing my ability to respond. Conference Room 12 has a view of the city skyline that costs the firm something like $40,000 a month in premium rent. Floor-to-ceiling windows that make you feel small against the expanse of the city. A table made of wood that probably came from a forest that no longer exists. Chairs that cost more than my first car. Preston was already seated when I arrived at 4 p.m. exactly. His laptop open, his Mont Blanc pen positioned precisely parallel to his leather notebook. Everything arranged like a photograph waiting to be taken. Christine sat to his left looking uncomfortable, which I appreciated. We'd known each other for 15 years. She'd helped me navigate 3 reorganizations and 1 particularly nasty client dispute. Thomas the lawyer sat to Preston's right looking bored, which was appropriate. For him, this was just another termination. Nothing personal, just paperwork. Margaret. Preston gestured to the chair across from him like he was inviting me to sit in my own office. Please, sit. We need to discuss some changes to the organizational structure. He talked for 18 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the wall behind his head, the antique grandfather clock that had been in that room since the building was constructed. He used phrases like strategic realignment and organizational efficiency and evolving client service models. He talked about the changing landscape of wealth management and the need for fresh perspectives and the importance of building systems that scale. He never once used the word fired. He never once used the word terminated. He never once acknowledged that what he was actually doing was ending 23 years of service because I was inconvenient to his vision. The severance offer was generous, relatively speaking, 6-month salary, benefits continuation for 12 months, a glowing reference letter. All contingent on signing a non-compete agreement that would have kept me out of wealth management entirely for 2 years. 2 years. An eternity in a relationship business. Long enough for every client to forget my name and move on. Christine slid the paperwork across the table. Her hands were shaking slightly. We'd like you to review and sign today. Margaret. Her voice was soft, apologetic. Your access will be terminated at end of business. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. Preston leaned back in his chair with that oil-slick smile. I want you to know this is purely a business decision. He put his hand on his chest like he was making a pledge of sincerity. Nothing personal. You built something impressive here. We're just building something different now. I looked at him for a long moment. The room was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. Then I looked at the paperwork. Then I looked back at him. I'm not signing the non-compete. My voice was calm, level. The same voice I used when clients panicked during market crashes. The same voice I'd used 1,000 times to talk people back from emotional decisions they would regret. Preston's smile flickered. I'm sorry. The non-compete. I pushed the paperwork back across the polished table. I won't be signing it. I'll take the severance and the benefits continuation. I'll leave today as requested. But I won't agree to stay out of wealth management for 2 years, or 2 months, or 2 weeks. Preston glanced at Thomas the lawyer. Thomas shrugged, almost imperceptibly. Without the non-compete, the severance terms are negotiable. His voice was neutral. She's not obligated to sign. Preston's smile had disappeared entirely. Margaret, be reasonable. His voice had an edge now, the petulance of someone who wasn't getting what they expected. The non-compete is standard. Everyone signs. You can't expect to walk out of here and just, take clients with you. I smiled. The first genuine smile I'd had all day. Maybe the first genuine smile I'd had in months. Actually, Preston, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Blue leather, my initials embossed on the corner. A gift from Mrs. Pemberton years ago. Inside were 237 personal service agreements, signed, notarized, completely ironclad. I spread them across the table like a dealer laying out cards. These are portable service contracts. I kept my voice conversational, almost pleasant. Every client I manage has signed one. They guarantee the client's right to transfer their accounts to follow their designated advisor if that advisor leaves the firm for any reason: voluntary departure, involuntary termination, retirement. Doesn't matter. The choice belongs to the client. Preston's face went pale. Actually, visibly pale. That's not, he stammered. Those aren't standard. No. I stood up, gathering the contracts back into their folder. They're not standard. They're something I negotiated personally with every single client over the past 15 years. One birthday card at a time, one hospital visit at a time, one 3 a.m. phone call at a time. Because I understood something you never will. Preston, I paused. Let him wait. These people don't trust Harrington Sterling Partners. They trust me. They trust Margaret Sullivan. They trust the woman who held their hand when their spouse died, who helped their children understand their inheritance, who talked them through every market crash and every moment of fear for 23 years. And trust, Preston, is portable. It goes where I go. I turned to Christine. I'll have my desk cleared within the hour. Please send the final paperwork to my attorney. She'll be in touch about the severance terms. Then I turned back to Preston. He looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. His $8,000 suit suddenly looked like a costume. One more thing. I held his gaze. When the quarterly report comes out showing client attrition, and when your uncle asks what happened to $800 million in assets under management, tell him to look up the Sullivan accounts. He'll understand what you lost. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. The walk to my office felt different than I expected. Not sad, not angry, not even particularly triumphant, just quiet. 23 years condensed into 2 cardboard boxes, one framed photo of my daughter's graduation, a small plant that had somehow survived on my windowsill since the first Clinton administration, a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Financial Advisor," a gift from a client's teenage son who thought he was being funny and was actually being accurate. Jennifer, my assistant, was crying at her desk when I came out. Word had already spread. I hugged her and told her she'd be fine. She was good at her job. Someone smart would snap her up. I gave her my personal cell phone number and told her to call if she ever needed anything. The security escort was polite but unnecessary. I knew the way out. I'd walked these halls for over 2 decades. I knew every corner, every conference room, every place where the afternoon light fell in a particular way. What Preston didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known because he'd never bothered to actually read anything beyond the summary numbers, was that I'd made 3 phone calls from my car before I even left the parking garage. The first was to Eleanor Pemberton, 92 years old, matriarch of the Pemberton Family Trust. $430 million under management. I'd known her for 21 years, since her husband first walked into my office with a modest portfolio and a dream of building something for his grandchildren. I'd held her hand at his funeral. I'd helped her navigate 3 children who couldn't agree on anything except that they all wanted their inheritance immediately. Margaret, dear. Her voice was thin but sharp. She never missed anything. I wondered when this call would come. That horrible young man, I could tell the moment I met him. Where are you going? We're coming with you. The second was to Richard Chen, managing partner of the Chen Family Foundation. $260 million in charitable assets. I'd known him since his father's death 17 years ago, when he inherited not just money, but the responsibility of continuing his father's philanthropic legacy. I'd helped him transform a modest family fortune into one of the largest private philanthropic organizations in the region. Margaret. His voice was warm, concerned. My sister already called. She saw the news on the firm's internal network. What do you need from us? The third was to Samuel Whitfield. Not Whitmore, Whitfield. The patriarch of a family whose wealth predated the Whitmore fortune by 3 generations. Old money, quiet money, the kind of money that doesn't need to announce itself. He was 84 years old and still sharper than anyone half his age. Margaret. A pause. A sigh. I've been expecting this call for 6 months. Ever since that boy started talking about optimization. He pronounced the word like it tasted bad. Tell me where to send the paperwork. By Friday morning, word had spread. Not through official channels, not through press releases or company announcements, through the network that actually matters in wealth management. Client to client, family to family, phone calls and lunches and quiet conversations at country club dinners and charity galas. Margaret Sullivan left Harrington Sterling. She's starting her own firm. Did she call you yet? By Friday afternoon, my phone hadn't stopped ringing. Not from Harrington Sterling, not from Preston or Christine or anyone official, from clients, one after another. Wanting to know where to send the transfer paperwork, wanting to know when I'd be ready to receive their accounts, wanting to know if I was okay. That last question surprised me. 23 years, and I'd somehow forgotten that the relationships went both ways. They weren't just my clients. I was their advisor. And they cared about what happened to me. Not because of the money, because of the relationship. By Monday morning, Preston Whitmore III had a problem. 118 accounts had submitted formal transfer requests. $412 million in assets were walking out the door. And the requests kept coming. Hour by hour, one after another, like dominoes falling in slow motion. I know because Christine called me, not in her official capacity, not as HR director of Harrington Sterling Partners, just as someone who'd known me for 15 years and thought I deserved to know what was happening. He's losing his mind, she whispered. I could hear office noise in the background. Raised voices, slamming doors. He called an emergency meeting with the board this morning. His uncle flew in from Palm Beach. They're trying to figure out how to stop the transfers. Their lawyers are going through every contract looking for loopholes. I told her they wouldn't find any. The personal service agreements were clear. 30-day transfer provisions, client discretion clauses, completely legal, completely binding, completely devastating. I spent that first week in my home office, setting up the infrastructure for what would become Sullivan Wealth Partners. Not a firm yet, not officially, just me, a laptop, a cell phone that wouldn't stop buzzing, and 2 decades of experience that told me exactly what needed to happen next. Licensing applications, compliance registrations, office space inquiries, staffing plans, everything I needed to build something new from the ground up. The Pemberton family was first. Eleanor Pemberton signed her transfer paperwork personally, with a handwritten note on her personal stationery. About time you worked for yourself. Dear, I always said you were too good for that firm. Her granddaughter delivered it by hand. The Chen Foundation followed within 48 hours. Richard Chen's signature was accompanied by a formal letter expressing the Foundation's full confidence in my continued stewardship. The Whitfield Trust took a week because Samuel Whitfield wanted to review every document personally, 3 times, with his own attorneys, which was exactly what I expected from a man who'd built his fortune on never signing anything he hadn't read thoroughly and understood completely. His note simply said, "About time." By the end of the first month, I had 173 client transfers confirmed, $620 million in assets committed, and calls coming in from clients I hadn't even reached out to yet. people I'd worked with years ago who'd heard through the grapevine and wanted to know if there was still room. The industry newsletter picked up the story in week 3. Senior advisor departure triggers mass client exodus at historic investment firm. The article didn't name me directly, but everyone in wealth management knew, in our industry. Everyone always knows. Preston tried to stop the bleeding. He sent personal letters to every departing client, letters I'm sure he didn't write himself. He offered fee reductions, significant ones. He promised enhanced services and dedicated attention and personalized care, all the things he'd spent months dismantling, all the things he'd called not scalable. None of it worked. Because trust doesn't come from letters written by strangers. Trust doesn't come from discounts and desperate promises. Trust comes from 23 years of showing up. From phone calls at 2 in the morning when someone is scared. From knowing that your advisor will be at your mother's funeral, not because it's good for business, but because it's the right thing to do. Preston had never shown up. Preston had never called anyone at 2 in the morning. Preston had never understood that the business of wealth management isn't really about wealth at all. It's about the human beings who have that wealth, their fears, their hopes, their families, their legacies. The board meeting happened 6 weeks after my departure. I know the details because Eleanor Pemberton's grandson worked in Harrington Sterling's legal department. He wasn't supposed to tell anyone anything, but Eleanor had a way of extracting information from her grandchildren that would have impressed professional interrogators. The numbers were catastrophic. $814 million in confirmed client departures. 94% of my former portfolio, exactly as the personal service agreements had guaranteed. The highest client attrition rate in the firm's 62-year history. The reputational damage was worse. Existing clients who hadn't left were nervous. They were asking questions. They wanted reassurance. They wanted to know if their advisors had similar portable agreements, and if so, what that meant for their relationship with the firm. Prospective clients were asking harder questions. Why did she leave? What happened? Is this a firm in trouble? Should we be looking elsewhere? The firm's biggest annual fundraiser, a charity gala that typically raised $3 million for local nonprofits, had seen ticket sales drop by 40%. Half the usual attendees had left with me. The other half were suddenly too busy to attend. Preston's uncle demanded answers. Harrison Whitmore hadn't built his branch of the family fortune by accepting failure quietly. He'd flown in from Palm Beach the day after the exodus started and hadn't left since. Preston tried to explain about strategic realignment and organizational efficiency and the need to reduce dependency on individual relationships. His uncle wasn't interested in explanations. The board voted. The vote was unanimous. Preston Whitmore III was removed from his position as Executive Vice President of Strategic Client Development, effective immediately. His title, his office, his authority, all of it, gone. They couldn't fire him outright. Family was family, even when family was catastrophically incompetent. But they could bury him. They could put him in a back office role with no client contact, no strategic input, and no future. Vice President of Internal Process Documentation. A title that meant nothing, a role that went nowhere. A desk in a windowless office on a floor that nobody visited. The newspaper caught the story 2 weeks later. Leadership shakeup at historic investment firm, following unprecedented client departure. Preston's name wasn't mentioned in the article, but everyone knew. In wealth management, everyone always knows. The final damage report took 3 months to fully calculate. $847 million in client assets transferred. 97% of my original portfolio, higher than I'd expected, higher than anyone had expected. Some clients I hadn't even contacted had initiated transfers on their own. They'd heard what happened and made their own decisions. Projected revenue loss of $18.6 million annually. That's what my relationships had been worth to Harrington Sterling Partners. $18 million a year in fees and commissions. and Preston had thrown them away because he wanted something more scalable, something more measurable, something that showed up on quarterly reports. The firm's valuation dropped 19% in the next quarterly assessment. A planned expansion into 2 new regional markets was canceled indefinitely. 3 senior partners took early retirement rather than deal with the fallout and the rebuilding. And Sullivan Wealth Partners, my firm, built from nothing in 8 weeks, opened our doors with $850 million under management, a waiting list of clients who wanted to join, and a philosophy written on the wall of our modest conference room: trust is not scalable. That's the point. We don't have algorithmic relationship mapping. We don't have digital-first engagement. We don't have client lifecycle optimization. We have me. We have relationships. We have trust. And we have a 98% retention rate in our first year, because it turns out that when you actually care about people, when you show up for them year after year, when you know their names and their fears and their hopes, they stick around. The letter arrived on a quiet Tuesday, 3 months after Sullivan Wealth Partners opened for business. Hand-delivered by a courier service I recognized from the old firm. Cream-colored envelope, Harrington Sterling Partners letterhead. Heavy paper, the kind they used for important correspondence. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Not Preston's. I'd never actually seen Preston's handwriting. Everything from him was typed and formatted and spell-checked by someone else. This was Harrison Whitmore's handwriting, the uncle, the smart one, the one who actually understood what the family business was supposed to be about. Dear Margaret, the letter was brief, personal, genuine in a way that surprised me coming from anyone named Whitmore. I owe you an apology. Not for what happened. You made your own choices, and they were the right ones. But for not seeing it coming, for not stopping it before it started. You were the firm's most valuable asset, and we treated you like a line item to be optimized. That was wrong. I should have known better. My grandfather would have known better. I hope you find success in your new venture. I suspect you already have. There was no signature, just his initials. H.D.W. And a postscript that made me laugh out loud for the first time in months. P.S. If it's any consolation, Preston is now in charge of digitizing our archived client records from the 1970s. He seems to find it challenging. I understand he's discovered that paper files don't respond well to optimization. I put the letter in my desk drawer, right next to the first personal service agreement I'd ever signed, 23 years ago, with a client who trusted me with her late husband's pension. That client was still with me. She'd transferred her account on day 1. She was 91 years old now. She still called every month just to chat. Funny thing about wealth management. The best advisors don't manage money. They manage trust, and trust doesn't show up on quarterly reports. It doesn't scale. It doesn't optimize. It just compounds, slowly and quietly, relationship by relationship, year after year, until one day it's worth $850 million and walking out the door. Preston Whitmore III never understood that. He thought relationships were inefficient. He thought trust was unmeasurable. He thought legacy meant a family name on a building instead of a lifetime of showing up for people who needed you. I understood something different. I understood that the opposite of efficient isn't wasteful. Sometimes the opposite of efficient is human. And human is the only thing that actually matters when you're asking someone to trust you with everything they have. Preston learned that lesson too late. I learned it early. And now I have 850 million reasons to be grateful that I paid attention. Thanks for sticking around for the whole story. If you made it this far, you understand something that Preston never will. Loyalty isn't given, it's earned. One relationship at a time, one conversation at a time, one act of genuine care at a time. Hit that subscribe button unless you want to be the kind of person who takes loyalty for granted, because trust me, that's a mistake you only get to make once. The next story is already in the works. Same principles, different industry, even bigger numbers.